Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously I like that moment at the beginning. Obviously it's like a family time moment, painting, the house and everything, got to make it theirs. And it's just like they're having fun. And then it is kind of that sad thing of, just because, Superman wants family time doesn't mean that the world's need for Superman goes away, So it's that thing of like they're having fun and he has to dash away. And it's like, yeah, well, now you guys know he's Superman. He doesn't have to hide it. But it's like, oh, let's get back to the fun. But it's also like, yeah, kind of like put a little bleh in the moment, so it's not, but it's like, and that scene in itself can mean, it means a lot just because it's like, yeah, in the drop of a dime, he has to basically leave his family behind to go do the Superman thing, but it's still just kind of like, oh, this is kind of our moment, this is our time, but it's like, hey, the world needs you, so it's a complicated thing, that's what that scene kind of showcases. But I thought what's interesting too is when we get back to the Kent farm, it brings up the whole conversation of like, hey, so you can hear like everything. And basically him describing that basically the collective like sounds in the world, that basically with his powers, he's able to kind of like notice the fluctuations. So that's how he's able to know the difference. Because they're like, how do you know the difference between someone who needs help and someone who's just yelling for a taxi? He's like, training, which I think that's so fascinating because it begs the question like, and I remember hearing someone talk about this years ago, and I thought it was such a fascinating thing that basically Superman kind of has to shut off his hearing, because obviously it's like if he wants to live some form of a normal life and not just be Superman 24/7, he kind of has to shut off his ears because if not, like he probably has to recognize like what stuff that he needs to jump into and like what stuff is actually just kind of everyday stuff that can kind of be handled on its own. But like I said, that begs the question like, is his hearing activated all the time? Which I don't think it is, but it'd be interesting. Like, what if his hearing's activated all the time and he literally has to dampen his hearing by being like, shut it off, and stop listening so hard. Like, what if it's something like that? I don't think it is. I think it is a thing of like, when it was out of control, yes, it fluctuated. We obviously saw aspects of his powers fluctuating and being out of control in Smallville. So I think it is just simply a thing of he has to kind of focus, because if he doesn't focus, he'll just hear everything. But obviously to hear like the discrepancies between everything. I just thought that was so interesting. Also showing you how far his freaking hearing goes. Like that was something he dealt with in China. It's like you went like around the world to deal with that. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that like we're kind of getting it here, but we never got it with the other Kryptonian, that was just kind of something floating through my mind. But obviously for Clark, it's that overprotective parent side of things because obviously, Jordan and Jonathan go to school. Obviously, Sarah's boyfriend, Sean, causing more trouble. And obviously, like, things were getting heated. Like, Jordan was pushed against the blocker. Like, he's clenching his fist. Like, his hand is shaking. And his eyes start glaring like he's about to do his heat vision. But luckily, Clark shows up at the school in time. But it's like, oh, your time is a little too perfect. Oh, it's because Dad was spying on us. And now the question is like, well, how long have you been doing this? Have you done it all the time? And it's like, for him, it's just like, your powers and everything. It's like, oh, you made it seem like my powers going out of control wouldn't be too much of an issue. But apparently it is a bigger issue. And it led to a really interesting conversation between him and Lois because Lois is like, yeah, you remember when I found out about you kind of spying on me like that? He was like, yeah, I had to get like a week's worth of like give you flowers for like a week. She's like, actually 2 weeks. And only reason why I forgave you is because I loved you. I was madly in love with you. But I thought that's so interesting because it's an aspect of a superhero where it's like, yeah, like you kind of have to learn boundary stuff because I think for him it was probably a situation of we never got into the details of it, but I'm sure it was something like she was working on a particular story and it's like, oh, he wanted to keep an eye on her, make sure she was okay. And it's like, obviously it's like, that's my privacy. Like, I get it. Like, it comes from a place of concern. Also, these are his kids, but it's like, it's their lives. Like, you're not going to be, I mean, to be fair, he kind of gets a little glimpse into people's lives with his hearing anyway, but it's also a thing of like respecting people's boundaries of like, and that's something he has to learn. It's something he had to learn as a significant other. It's also something he has to learn as a father, because we don't know how long he's been doing that since they were kids. Oh, at a certain point it's like, oh, it's cute, but other points it's like, oh no, like you're crossing a line, like you're interfering with our lives. So it's like, make the same promise to the boys that you made to me. So I thought that was really interesting. So for him, it's like, I won't listen in. Are we good? And it's like, yeah. But when they show up at school, what was interesting, though, is Jordan decides to try out for football, which immediately Jonathan, and I think that's so interesting that Jonathan is the more wary son, being like, whoa, maybe that's not a good idea. You were told not to, your powers and everything. It's like, come on. Because for him, it's a thing of, because he doesn't have to worry as much as Clark. Clark is like well above stronger than a human, but look, well, I guess to both his benefit and detriment, like, Jordan has superhuman strength, but it's not the crazy amount. Once again, what did his grandfather say? It's like Jorah was like, he won't have even 100th of your strength. So it puts him above a normal human, at least definitely someone of his own age. It puts him above like that, but it doesn't put him in the same lane. So it's not the thing that he has to necessarily worry about it like Clark probably would have, just like hurting people. So gives him above edge, because I was expecting things to go sideways, but maybe that's kind of representation of Jordan's either control or just showing you that how big the difference in strength level between him and his dad is, that like obviously we had seen him want to get seriously injured. We got a lot of people like put on their asses, but that was about it. But like I said, I just thought it was fascinating that Jordan kind of, you'd almost think, because Jordan seems like he's probably the one, like, because I think the way they set Jonathan up, it makes you think, oh, he's the jock, he's kind of meatheadish, but like, no, he's kind of he's a very level-headed kid, but I think that's also because he kind of has to be more level-headed just because of his brother's condition and like, trying to be there for his brother to kind of balance things out a little bit more. I think he has to probably be a little bit more level-headed than most, so it's just interesting because, like I said, I would have assumed he's the douchey, jockey brother, which he is to a certain extent, but he's also got a good head on his shoulder in certain regards, so it's kind of like, whoa, Dad warned about this, but Jordan was kind of enjoying it. And because of everything, it actually led to him making things good between him and Sean. He's like, yo, I'm sorry, I kissed Sarah, I didn't know, but that wasn't cool. Are we good? And it was kind of a thing. It was almost like this, you could say your argument, you make the argument like sometimes that's a dude thing. Like it's a weird dude thing of like, yo, you gotta pump your chest, beating your chest like King Kong, and just to be like, all right, we good. It's like we had to fight it out a little bit, but we're good. Yes, men were Neanderthals. Like sometimes stuff works like that. Doesn't mean it's going to be the end all fix all, but sometimes that is all it takes for dudes is just to be like knock their heads together. Sometimes like, are we good? Nah, we're good. And it's like, yeah, like I said, sometimes men were that simplistic. But that's what I kind of took from the whole thing. Obviously, Clark wasn't too happy when he found out, Jordan was lying to him. And but I thought was interesting though is because for Clark, it's a situation of like, there could have been a mistake. He's like, maybe it was a mistake me taking to see your grandfather. It's like, it was a mistake. You've been making a lot of mistakes lately. And it's like, I forgot what it was he said to Clark. And it's like, maybe you shouldn't be around. Maybe you go back to you not being around as much anymore, which was like, whoa, crossing that line. And Clark was like, go to your room. I even love Jonathan being like, yeah, I have no idea what's wrong with, I'm with you guys. I have no idea what's going on with him. And it's like, you too, go to your room as well. But, I thought it was, once again, Jordan being, like I said, he seems like he might be, the douchey brother. Yes, he cracks on his bro every once in a while. But what really is powerful is when he's there for his brother, being like, because he said it himself, like, no one else is going to really help you through this power thing. I'm going to be there for you. It's like, because as his twin, it's like, I'm going to understand you on a level like mom and dad never can. So it's like, I've watched you and seen what you've kind of been through. And for him, it's like, I get Jordan lied to you, but like, this is actually good for him. Like, he's like, I've never seen Jordan this happy in like forever. Like, because Lois had told him like, you need to kind of find out what's there, what's eating Jordan. Like, you got to find out what's at the heart of his anger. And Jonathan said something really interesting, which was, you're basically telling him not to be special. Like, how could, like, of course that's going to make you angry because it's like, for him, it's like, for Jordan, it's like, he's always been different, and now he's different in a good way. Of like, I have these powers, and I can flex, I can stand out, it makes him feel good because now it's like, you find out you're special, but now you're not allowed to shine for being because Clark had said that like his dad had set up the rules, and he was like, yeah, I didn't like that, but at the time, now that he's older, now he recognizes those rules were set up for his benefit, so he's kind of doing the same thing for his kids. But I think it's so interesting because it's like, not letting your kids shine at being special, obviously they're going to resent you a little bit, but it's also like you're making them deny a part of who they are. They shouldn't have to shine any less. I guess it's about, you're worried about exposure for the family and everything. As they ended up saying, like, obviously, well, it's not like you guys are going to post it on Facebook, but it's like, we got to be careful. But it's like denying a part of who, like, Jordan is, these abilities that he has, you know? And even Clark talks to him later on about he wanted to try out for baseball, but his dad said no. And he was close to trying out, but ultimately he didn't. And he does kind of hold some regrets to it, which is interesting in this continuity, just because, like, because I know, because even pulling from Smallville, I know that Clark played football in Smallville. Obviously, there were accidents, there were moments where he had to, like, kind of pull back. So, but it's interesting to know, like, in this continuity, he never played any sports just because of that, you know. And he holds some regrets about that. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And obviously it's like, you know, asking Jordan, like, is this what you really want? And it's like, at the beginning, he wasn't really sure. But now for him, it's like, you know, it feels good. He's happy. He really enjoys doing this. And once again, like, he was able to get the bullies to kind of back off of him. And, yeah, once again, it's a twisted male thing of, like, friendships, I think. It's like, you can be at beefing with someone and then kind of be friends the next. I don't think that's just a male thing. I think it's just a human thing. It can be, but I think a lot of times, statistically, it probably could just end up being a male thing. Like, I think it's just the weird thing between male relationships are like that, or I think you're just weird in that regard, or like that's how we, like, oh, we were in a bad place, but now we're in a good place. It's all good. Let's put our beef behind us. You know, like, I think it comes with its benefits and its detriments, and, you know, there are pros and cons to it, I think. But obviously Clark signing off on Jordan, you know, in that regard, because I think it's so interesting, because obviously Clark is struggling as well, but it's not just him. Lana and Kyle have their own issues, because for Lana, she's checking in all the time about Sarah, because Sarah's at her appointment. It's like, oh, maybe we should have gone in there, but Kyle's like, wait, did you want to just, like, you know, it's like, it's fine. But for Lana, it's a situation she explains later on, like, the reason why she's so on top of Sarah, why she's so hovering all the time, because she's scared. Because for Sarah, it's like, you know, my mom's making a big deal out of it. It's like, to her, like, she's underselling it. It's like, you took a whole bunch of pills. Like, you were going to die. Like, of course, any parent's going to be losing their damn mind about that, you know? And so obviously Sarah's in a position where if everything is going on, she ends up breaking up with Sean. She's like, I think she even said, like, oh, it was kind of time. Once again, Sean was kind of an asshole. Like, I think it's one of those things of like, hey, he's kind of nice to me. I saw the nicer sides to him, but even I kind of start recognizing, you know, I think for her, probably whatever she really talked about in her therapy session, I think made her think about making changes in her life. Then her mom's getting in her case about, oh, you're not, like, doing, like, you're not focusing what's going on with you. And she just got frustrated. It was like, I quit. And she kind of blows up at her mom, because for her, it's like, you're acting like everything's okay, like we're the perfect family unit. You and dad are arguing all the time. You're taking pills just to go to sleep. My sister is like a bully at school, that she's kind of bullying everyone. And you want to make it seem like we're perfect and we're fine, and we're not. It's kind of messed up to kind of put the family business out there like that. But for her, it's just, you know, I mean, the same thing applies to Jordan as well. Like, oh, both of them have their own situations that they're dealing with, and they're trying to navigate, you know. They're at a very crucial age. Like, they're teenagers. Obviously, your hormones are all over the place. Like, and I think you add that on top of some of the stuff they're dealing with, whether it be Sarah's situation, what she's dealing with on a personal and emotional level. And the same thing for Jordan, like, on a, you know, his disorder, as well as, you know, just so. I think for both of them, it's being a teenager and just their family dynamics come a little harder than it might be in other cases. I mean, especially when you look at Sarah's family, because it's like, oh, like, let's have dinner. And it's for her, it's like, why? She doesn't say this, but it's almost like it's a facade. Like, we want to sit down and have a happy dinner. It's like, no. But what I thought was really interesting was kind of, well, for one, like, her and Clark talking about it. And I thought that was kind of, you know, like the conversations that they both had about, like, you know, oh, teenagers are not really knowing what they want. I even love the whole thing of, like, you know, it's like, oh, like, yeah, I got my keys in it's Smallville. It's like supposed to be like, yeah, like nothing really, really bad happens in Smallville. It's a small, quaint little town where everyone knows each other. So it's that type of town of like, I'm going to leave my keys in my truck. No one's going to try and steal my truck. It's Smallville. Yeah, it's Smallville, you know? So And it was nice to have that moment of Lana and Clark, kind of talking, just, parents kind of struggling, dealing with teenagers and everything. But I really thought was a nice heart to heart was what Lana had with her daughter, finally getting her to open up about everything. And for her, it's like, for Sarah, it's just like with everything that's been going on lately with the family, it just felt like she kind of felt like she was trapped in this town life, trapped in like this family, like there was kind of no escape, that basically her life was kind of almost like supposed to be a certain thing and there was no escaping that life. And Lana's like, being me, she's like, I didn't say that. It's like, no, I get it. Because like even Lana saying like, I put on like, a fake smile, like I don't always show how I'm really feeling. And she's like, why do you do that? It's like, because I was raised that way. And honestly, I think that's a really deep conversation to have, that like I can understand that. I, on a personal level, am someone who never tells people how I'm feeling. My response is usually, oh, I'm okay or I'm fine. I never tell people when I'm sad, just because I don't want people to worry about me. But it's also, I think this, especially in Lana's case, I think it is a thing of like, I'm a mom, I'm supposed to keep up this appearance of being strong. And it's like, people have their moments of not, you don't have to smile and make it seem like everything's okay all the time. But for her, it's like, it's kind of like, her mom kind of taught her that, like, oh, you're supposed to smile at the neighbors and never let them see you cry. Like, that you're not supposed to be vulnerable and kind of open like that. But for her, it's like she wants Sarah to do what makes her happy. And she's, trying to work on making, do things and changes to make it so that she's happy as well, And I thought that was a touching, beautiful moment, like for them to kind of both be open about what happened, because I think that leads to more and more issues. It's not talking, because even, Lana was like, Sarah, you and I used to be so close, but now it's like there's this big distance between us. It's like, whether you want to quit the cheerleading, whether you want to keep me at arm's length, I just need to know why you did what you did. And I think it was an open and frank conversation on many different fronts about, what Sarah was going through. And I think talking about it out loud to your family kind of explain, or at least to Lana, makes it at least lets her know, like, okay, where you need to kind of be working on things and what you're kind of going through. And I recognize what I need to fix as well, recognizing like, hey, how I've been handling things isn't the best way either. So I just thought that was just, it was a situation of like how I was raised to kind of like bottle stuff up and not really show what was really there. Like, because like I said, because it's seen as almost like this weakness of like, no, don't show like sadness, and like I said, that's not something that's ever been put on me. That's just like, I mean, maybe on some level, on some micro level, or maybe on a massive level that maybe I'm not subconsciously aware of. Maybe it's a societal thing of like, I'm a guy, I'm not supposed to be, like wear my heart on my sleeve type of thing, because I think typically males, we have a tendency to bottle stuff up. At the very least, I can't speak for every male out there. I speak for myself. I'm someone who definitely bottles a lot of stuff up. Once again, I don't tell people when I'm really sad. So like that scene with Sarah like really resonated with me. I think I kind of resonate with Jordan a lot too, just because like I think on some I kind of have some, there's some resonance between like those characters of life, not just as a teenager. Like I could see a little bit of myself in those characters, and definitely in Jordan's case, I could see a little bit of myself, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like those aspects have gotten heightened even more as I've gotten older. Like obviously, that was me 14 years ago, Jesus. Because of a similar aspect, not it's not a one for one, but regardless, it's really interesting. And I think once again, I think it's so fascinating that the show is able to take that time to really focus on the human element, because once again, for a lot of people, it's like, oh, Superman's boring, he's invulnerable. It's like, yes, like it's easy when you have something you can hit and fight against. When it's something like this on a personal and emotional level, you have to find a different way to, attack it, So, and I think that brings this very neat human element to not just this story, but, it takes the superhero story in a very interesting direction. At least that's kind of my take on it. But, yeah, what's interesting too about this is Lois obviously working at the Gazette. Obviously, she's trying to run her Morgan Edge stories. But obviously, Chrissy's kind of like, kind of pick something else to do, because it's just like, because even Lois kind of recognizes that she's kind of putting the rest of the town at a distance from her, because the town doesn't want to resonate with her because of like, oh, you want to talk to us Smallville folk, even though you're not from Smallville, you don't know what it's like to live here. So there's that little dissonance of like, you know, that connectivity of like, you're not kind of one of us, you're still kind of seen as a little bit of an outsider, which Clark is trying to tell her, like, give it some time, like, you know, there are good people in Smallville. You just got to give them time. They got to warm up to you. But obviously, she doesn't want to talk about these like more puff pieces. Like she came here to write about Morgan Edge, and she only wants to kind of focus and tell that story. And I think that's something she kind of comes around to a little bit, where she talks about she was like, you know, I was wrong too because because Chrissy's like, you were right. I didn't want to dive into like this bit because like, you know, it's not something that she's used to. So obviously diving into something like a Morgan Edge thing, especially with this large scale conspiracy, it scared her. But also, you know, I think for Lois, it's a thing of there's so many stories that aren't told. And I think going forward, not just with the Morgan Edge thing, but I think it's also with Smallville as well. Like, you know, it's going to be telling these people's story, telling their side of things, getting to know them could be the bridge necessarily to, well, bridge that gap between her and some of the people she's trying to get in contact with. So I think that's kind of a fascinating element to the whole situation. Obviously she runs into like Sharon, and obviously Sharon's from New Carthage, and it's like, okay, I'm one of those towns that Morgan Edge hit up before. My son sent me this voicemail saying that the job opportunity of a lifetime wasn't what he thought it was. So I thought that was really interesting. And obviously she went to go investigate later on when she went to talk to Sharon, because apparently there's like 3 other people who've gone missing. But goes there and finds that guy who had well, most likely set her car on fire. Might have been someone else considering everything at the end, but we'll get there soon enough. But he attacked Lois, and luckily Lois, well, when Lois stabbed him in the ear, I was like, oh, huh. He kind of kept going. I'm like, maybe that's something else, but, you know, I love her pulling out the thing, and he's like, oh, that's not going to help you. And she's like, yeah, but he will. And Clark comes in, smashing the dude, and obviously goes over and starts hitting the dude, but, like, the moment he lands, throws a punch, the dude grabs it, like, oh, so you're not human. You're something else, or at least you have superpowers. Once again, it's kind of pretty dope seeing him kind of do super fast punches. They don't do anything to the dude. But I like that he kind of had the edge up on Clark. But in that moment, like, Clark getting up, it's not like, oh, I stood up and I got up. It's like, no, I floated up and I'm floating right there. And the guy's like, all right, I'm ready for you. And he goes after Clark. Clark freezes him. And that scene in itself was pretty dope because it looked like something out of Mortal Kombat. I mean, to be fair, more specifically, it was something out of Injustice, which makes sense because obviously they've been showing Injustice throughout this TV show. But it's also like, obviously, the Injustice games as well as the more recent Mortal Kombat games were made by NetherRealm. Like, so obviously, like, the Injustice games share a lot of the aspects of the Mortal Kombat games. So, but it just like, it felt like you could see so much in like the freeze breath and uppercut. It's like, oh, that felt like a, well, to be fair, if we wouldn't just stay on in Injustice, that was a very Mr. Freeze, or, you know, if you want to go Mortal Kombat wise, that looked like a Sub-Zero move, which is interesting considering, like, oh, Makad Brooks is in the Mortal Kombat movie. You have Sub-Zero, but Makad Brooks, who played Jimmy Olsen on Supergirl, so connectivity that wise, you know, obviously that's under the Warner Brothers banner as well, but regardless, it was dope, like the uppercut, and then also like him, like, he did a very Injustice Flash move where he's like punches him and then like boom, like dashes all over the place. I was like, that's a very like Injustice Flash move, because Flash literally has a moveset combo exactly like that, very similar at least. Then throws him up and then punches him. I was like, that was just a sick sequence of events, you know. So that was interesting, like kind of seeing that moveset like that. So luckily, it seems like they were able to kind of, you know, save Sharon's life. But obviously, it opens up a whole bunch of other questions, because we see Chrissy's actually, you know, oh, I'm getting into this, and like I've got this board out. So it's like, all right, who's this guy, and why does someone who's got superpowers like that working for Morgan Edge? And we see at the end, his I guess assistant or whatever ends up having heat vision. So I was like, okay, so each of you, and that's why I'm wondering, is this going to flow back into Jordan and Jonathan to a certain extent, but I'm like, oh, do each of you only have a fraction of Superman's power? Did he only have the superhuman strength and not to the full extent? Maybe like Jordan, he has a weakened level of superhuman strength, enough to still kind of hold Superman back in certain regards, and obviously still get up after all those blows. So maybe he has some of the invulnerabilities as superhuman strength, but then she has the heat vision. So do they have all of the powers just to a smaller extent? I would assume not, because he didn't use heat vision at all. She did, so it might be a thing of they only have a fraction of his powers, which, if you didn't hear what I said last episode, I believe that's how Jonathan and Jordan's whole thing is going to work out, is that they both have powers. I think they complement each other. I think when Jonathan's around, Jordan has a lot more control. I think there's kind of an ebb and flow to their powers, that there's a little bit of an equilibrium. So like maybe like Jordan has some of the abilities, but Jonathan has others. Like I think it is kind of like a Wonder Twins thing to a certain extent, of like them together is one Superman. Separated, they can use a fraction of the abilities, but together they make one whole Superman. So them together can end up potentially reaching greater heights than their dad. Very much Gohan had the potential to go Super Saiyan 2 way before Goku did, type of thing. Like, I think it might be something of that, of a similar vein in that regard. So, has it, like, maybe they technically have a higher threshold potential, just because, for one, they're twins, even though they're, like, both half Kryptonian, half human. That human aspect gives them unlimited potential, combined with their Kryptonian thing, plus being, twins. Like, once again, that's my running theory. Maybe we'll find out, oh, Jonathan actually doesn't have any powers, and Jordan's the only one who does. Like I said, we'll see on that front. But I thought that was an interesting development. But obviously, another aspect to this is that though Clark wants to work as an assistant coach, he wants to use this as an opportunity to stay closer to his boys, especially if both of them are playing football. And the coach is like, yeah, sorry, you can do this and that, spend time with your kids. But then, like, you had Lois be like, oh, he'll work for free. And the coach is like, why don't you start with that, Kent? Yeah, here. And, like, obviously him struggling with the thing, like the drinks or whatever. He's like, oh. I was like, oh, right. You have to be Clark Kent. You have to fumble and make yourself look like, unassuming. Like, wow, your dad's kind of like, yeah. Especially later on, because he's dragging it out. Like, he's struggling. And Jordan's like, all right, we're going to have to pretend, like, help me with this. Pretend like, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I'm like, I like that. Kind of leaning into it. Because it's kind of an inside joke that no one else is in on. It's like, oh yeah, like, oh my god, I'm so weak, I'm struggling, I've got to be so unassuming, I'm nothing special. I thought that was neat. But I also liked, obviously we are kind of building kind of that friendship, like obviously not just Jordan and Sarah, but also like Sarah with Jonathan as well. There's something building there between all of them, but obviously something definitely, it's like, oh yeah, you quit the cheer squad, and Jordan's like, oh, like, it's my first game and everything, and she's like, oh, you want me to be there? He's like, oh yeah, that would be, and they're kind of awkward, and then like his dad shows up. It's like, oh yeah, my dad's now the assistant coach. So I just thought that was I don't know, it's really neat. And it's also cool that, it's like, obviously he gets to stay nearby, but obviously what that necessarily looks like with Jonathan and Jordan Blaine. Granted, I think it's there to also, hey, spend time with the kids, use this as an opportunity to grow closer together as a family, but also probably use this as a learning experience of like, hey, if he ever goes too far with his powers or something, you can be there to kind of help at least rein him back in under certain conditions, while also kind of letting him, like, go off, live his life, and do his thing. So, like I said, I really like of interesting developments in this episode. I'm really curious at the end of the day to kind of find out where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Really quickly, just because it pertains to everything, news has come out, like, I want to say it came out sometime last week or kind of over the weekend. Might have been a couple days ago. Yeah, I think it was like last week the news came out about Superman and Lois after its 5th episode. I'd heard 4th, but now I was reading something else that said 5th episode. The show's going on a little bit of a hiatus so they can finish the rest of the season, I believe. And then Supergirl's 6th and final season is going to start, like, what is it, the 30th? Like, there's going to be, like, a week buffer, and then, like, Supergirl's going to start. And then when Superman and Lois return, Supergirl's going to be on a break and eventually start out the rest of its final season at some point later on down the line. Just kind of wanted to kind of throw that out there. So I'm, just kind of keeping you informed if you are someone that's unaware. But, yeah. regardless of all that, I'm still really interested to see where everything ends up taking us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.